First up is The Little Mermaid, which is the latest in the long line of Disney live action, and I put live action in air quotes, remakes of their animated classics. And I'm going to start off by saying Halle Bailey, who plays the new Ariel, is an absolute superstar. I thought she was amazing in this. I'm very happy for every little child who gets to grow up and feel represented by her on screen. I don't want to take that away from anyone. However, this movie is incoherent. Somehow they managed to add almost 50 minutes to the original animated film. And The Little Mermaid is, Disney did not come up with the story. They actually just sort of sanitized the story. The original one's much darker, but whatever. It was still a really good animated film. Credit where credit is due. But they have added 50 minutes to their original telling of it, and it is not a necessary 50 minutes. There are a couple sequences where I'm like, yeah, okay, I see how you've tried to update it a little bit, and this adds value, but the rest of it, I'm like, what are you doing here? So you have Halle Bailey as Ariel, again, the absolute highlight of the film. Credit to her for saving this experience, but she can only do so much. Then you've got Jonah Hauer-King as Prince Eric, who, whatever, he's whatever. I don't know. I don't care. Also, they give him a song in this that is so unnecessary. I call it the sad emo boy song. And I'm like, this is one of those sequences you could have cut because it doesn't add anything to it that is contributing to the detriment of this movie and why it is not as valuable experience. You've got Javier Bardem as King Triton, which, okay, fine, sure, whatever. Like, I don't know why. This is a question I had about the animated film. Like, I guess sort of spoilers for this review, but, I'm assuming you've seen the Little Mermaid animated version. But, it's very awkward with King Triton because in the animated version, he has all these daughters of the sea, and they are already semi sort of different looking. And in this, they've made them sort of the United Colors of Benetton ad of the world. And I'm like, who is their mother? How does sea procreation work? Why are they all different races? Like, what's going on here? They're not going to bother to explain that part of it, but they'll give us 10 sad emo boy songs, whatever. You've got Melissa McCarthy's Ursula, who I think she does a fine job. And I'll talk about the animation and locomotion later. Hers was the hardest to translate because she's an octopus. And I was just like, I feel the constraints of trying to make this an underwater creature thing happening here. And it felt stilted in a way that animation liberates you from. Daveed Diggs played Sebastian. He actually was fine. They gave him a couple moments. He grew on me. Jacob Tremblay is Flounder. Flounder is the most horrifying character design I've seen out of all of them because Flounder is like a realistic looking fish in this as opposed to, the cute, cuddly, rounded fish that we see in the animated one. And let me tell you, well, first of all, I actually don't think the fish species that he is a flounder, like a visual flounder. I could be wrong here, but not an attractive fish is what I'll say. And then Aquafina is Scuttle, which, sure, I mean, whatever, it was fine. They also give Scuttle a rap, and I was just like, no, just stop trying to give everybody a song. We don't need to give everyone a song. It's unnecessary. Lin-Manuel Miranda helped write the new music, and, I love Lin-Manuel Miranda, but sometimes we must be stopped. For our own good, we must be stopped. So, again, they have added an extensive amount to this film, and some of it is helpful. Like, what I appreciated is that they are trying to add storylines that help create a relationship between the two of them instead of just, oh, I see him, he is a human man, I love him, I must give up my entire life for him. Okay, fine. But they also add a bunch of superfluous things that just make it really long. Like, if I was a little kid, I don't know if I'd have the attention span for this. And then the other things I want to talk about are it's visually very muted by trying to be photoreal because, yes, the ocean is a colorful and beautiful, gorgeous place, but there are limitations to it if you are trying to make it semi-realistic or realistic, even though there are merpeople swimming around, etc. So Under the Sea is a good example of something where I missed the colorfulness of it. I missed the vibrancy. I missed the palette. I missed the joy out of it and like the motion and all this stuff. Yes, fine, you can't have a fish playing a saxophone in this, but you can try and do other things, and they just limited themselves in a way that was disappointing. And then also, and this might be just a me note, but having come from animation, the way the mermaids move, and merpeople, I guess, move, and Ursula, whatever, a mer octopi move, is very disturbing to me. So they aren't like moving how I think they should be moving, because their tails and their torsos don't move together. Like, their tails move, but then, if you ever do a dolphin kick in the water or whatever, like, you have to use your abdomen in order to do so, but they're moving separately from, and so, or like they're just, their torsos just aren't moving at all. And so it's very odd. I think the hardest was Javier Bardem, because he has all this fake hair and, this like big muscly chest that probably isn't his. And he's also 11 feet long. And it's just, it reads visually, subconsciously probably, odd in the back of your mind. And Melissa McCarthy, again, is the biggest problem, because Ursula in the animated version can slither all over the place and move like an octopus. But in this one, because there's a human being attached to, whatever rig they had to set up, it reads odd to me. And you can see them like trying to cut the camera angle so they can actually feature an upside down, all this stuff. And at many turns, I'm like, there is a reason that this made sense as an animated story, because you are not limited by these things. So in addition to, the bloated runtime where they've added in these songs that don't really add value, they've taken away a few songs, which, okay, fine, whatever. Like, they had the big showstoppers, so okay. Visually muting it, making it just reads kind of strange. Again, Halle Bailey, more power to her. I appreciate that they tried to make it a little more romantic instead of just, like I said, loved at first sight and there's no substance to it. But at the end of the day, whatever. If you love this version of it, more power to you. But I am not running out there to be like, please go watch The Little Mermaid, the new version of The Little Mermaid. I don't think it improved upon the previous one, except for in terms of representation, which is a huge factor, but I wanted it to be a good movie too, because it had a good starting point. So it's tough to be able to, it's a tough conversation to have, but I think looking at it from just the perspective of having the base one as my childhood and then having this one, and I wasn't a huge Little Mermaid person either. In fact, I forgot a lot of it. I had to ask people at the end. I was like, did this happen in the animated version? I forgot. And they're like, no, that didn't. I said, okay, fine. But if you are a huge fan of the original one, I think you'll still like this because of the music and because you like the story inherently. If you are on the original one, this is not going to be, I think, the one that converts you and makes you into a Little Mermaid person. However, if you are proud to be represented by this film, I am incredibly happy for you. Like, honestly, because that is the biggest value out of this thing. So I personally am going to give it a 2.8 out of 5. The next thing I have this week is American Born Chinese, and it is an adaptation of the graphic novel from Jean Luen Yang. I was nervous about this one going into it just because when they announced that they were making it into a show, I was super excited. I ran out and read the graphic novel. I was like, oh, this is very good, but I am a little bit concerned about the ability to adapt it, even at this point in time. There are elements of it that feel a little bit dated. There are elements of it that I was like, man, if you do not have a background as an Asian and Asian American person, particularly a Chinese person, like, I don't know how some of this is going to translate. But then I watched the show, and I think they did such a good job adapting it, modernizing it, adapting it, making it feel universal and compelling and, this bigger story actually than is just being told in the graphic novel, but also touching on the elements of the being a child of immigrants experience and the otherness of it. And I think they brought in the modernness of technology in a really clever way. So it has Michelle Yeoh as Guan Ying, who's the bodhisattva of compassion. And then you've got Ben Wong as Jin Wong, who is the sort of protagonist of the story. He's just an American boy who happens to have a Chinese background. Yan Yan Yo as his mother, Chin Han as his father. Daniel Wu plays Sun Wukong, who is the Monkey King, for those who don't know, which is one of the most famous stories, I think, in mythology, legend, etc. Ke Huy Quan plays Freddie Wong, who is a character within it. This was the one I was kind of really concerned about them updating. So in this version of it, he plays a former star on TV who was, in a show that was not the most politically correct at the time, but it was a job. And I absolutely love what they did with that story. And Ke Huy Quan was the perfect person to bring compassion and experience to this in a way that I think very few other people could. Jim Liu is Wei Chen. He plays I don't want to spoil it. So Jim Liu is Wei Chen. Sydney Taylor plays a girl named Amelia. And wow, I loved this so much. I think the scope of it is amazing. It was also so cool to hear it in Chinese. Like, so much of the show is in Chinese. Yes, there are subtitles. Please get over the subtitles for it. I'm going to ask you to do that for multiple things this week. But yes, I will say, reading some of the subtitles, the context of some of the things they're actually saying gets a little bit lost. I know this happens when you are listening to something in another language, but the fact that even I, with my rudimentary Chinese, was like, that's not what they just said, or, that's close to, but the subtext is missing here. We can't have it all, but I do wish that they'd been able to communicate some of the nuances of what they said just a little bit better. But either way, it is this, amazing story that combines the epic scope of Chinese legends with the high school experience. Ben Wong does such a good job in it. Like, teen child actors are really tough, but I just felt he was so authentic in it. And I didn't know anything about him when I heard he was cast, but when I see it now, I'm like, oh my God, yes, perfect. Yeah, again, the adult cast is amazing. There are some really great cameos and guest stars, and I just cannot recommend this show enough. So American Born Chinese is out on Disney Plus now. The whole season is out. The next thing I have is Gremlins, Secrets of the Mogwai, which is a new animated show. It is a prequel to Gremlins, and again, because this is my AAPI Heritage Month sort of roundup, it takes place in China, which I love as well. It's interesting because, Gremlins, at the end of the day, it goes from cute to scary, and I was like, how are you going to do that with an animated show? Because they are super cute. If you look at the design of Gizmo, I'm just like, oh my God, I want to pinch your cheeks and you're so cute. But they found a way to do it, and I was just like, oh no, thank you. The character designs are very interesting. It's a very stylized show. You've also got this really amazing voice cast in it. Again, what a month. What a month. You've got Ming-Na Wen, you've got B.D. Wong, you've got James Hong, you've also got Matthew Rhys and Isaac Wong. And again, I was like, okay, this is cute, this is fun, this is adventure-y. And then I was like, oh my God, that is scary. So it's fun to have that sort of adventure-y feel again. It's fun to have like what feels like a very authentic cast, and clearly people put time and love into this, and it's an homage to the original while also going on its own more epic journey, because I think the thing about Gremlins is it feels like contained to, the destruction of the city. This is more about the origin of the Gremlins and all this stuff, and I, absolutely enjoyed it. I've only seen the first 2 episodes, but I will completely keep watching it. Gremlins Secrets of the Mogwai is on Max. I hate having to say Max, but it's on Max. The next thing I have is called Drops of God. This one's on Apple TV Plus, and again, an adaptation. Was not expecting this. It's based on a manga series, and so it's about a wine competition, effectively, like the world's greatest, not sommelier, but like wine enthusiast slash person, expert on wine, passes away, and he has this huge collection of wine that he set up a competition in order to inherit between his estranged daughter and his protege. So, Fleur Geffier, I'm so sorry, I probably pronounced her name so wrong, plays his daughter. Tomohisa Yamashita plays his protege, and I would not have expected, I called it, so I'm not a wine person. I'm like yes, this is wine. When I drink it, it tastes fine. But it kind of, this is actually a compliment, kind of reminded me a little bit of Ratatouille in a way, where the way they describe the wine and the way they visualize the wine and the way like the flavors and stuff like that reminded me of like the Remy sequence when he's in the, it's sort of like a experimental thing, and like the flavor profiles are coming in and all this stuff. So yeah, I would not have expected to get as swept up in a competition about wine as I did. And, some of it's a little to a lot pompous about the way they're talking about the things. I'm like, okay, whatever, sure. This vintage and these grapes and this, that, and but I got really sucked into it. It's kind of soap opera-y and melodrama-y, but so serious, which, it works for it. The thing that I encourage people to get over is the fact that it's extensively in multiple languages. It is in Japanese, it is in French. There's a fair amount of English in it as well, but yeah, I really enjoyed going on the ride. I was not expecting to. I just sort of like stumbled upon this, but then I was like, yeah, I want to know what happens, because they take it so seriously, and I'm going to go ahead and assume they love wine and just I give them the benefit of the doubt here. It works. So Drops of God is streaming on Apple TV Plus. And then just to bookend things, so it's Mermaid Month, and it's also AAPI Heritage Month. I just watched a documentary series called MerPeople. It is out on Netflix, and I did not know anything about people who dress up as underwater performers, I guess would be the right phrase for them. But they certainly do. And they have like, elaborate, expensive silicone tails, and they dress up, and it deep dives into, a couple people's storylines and then the larger community. And it's interesting seeing the various entry points into the world of mer-personing. And I have to say, I'm super impressed. So I am a scuba diver, and so I spend a fair amount of time underwater, but I have a mask on. I have an oxygen tank strapped to my back, and having to do some of the things they do, or just spending the amount of time in the water that they do without goggles on, usually, because the performers who do, Renaissance fairs and things like that, they aren't wearing goggles because they're sort of going for the beauty angle. And I'm like, ow, my eyes, And then there's the people who are a little more social media oriented, like, Instagram and TikTok friendly, etc. There's different sized folks. And so there's a whole conversation around that. There's various scales of representation. There are a lot of fish jokes in this, I'm realizing. Scales, but, the sort of trying to integrate into the community, it just ended up being this fascinating look at people who are, again, sort of like drops of God, very seriously dedicated and over serious potentially about their passion. I don't think it's a particularly lucrative thing. It seems like maybe a very expensive hobby for some of them, not all of them, but they do talk about how, it's not a cheap thing to do, and there are only X amount of paid roles and performances around it. But yeah, it's a 4-part series. It blazes by. It's a world in which I think very few of us know a ton about, but I think the people are compelling and interesting. They just give enough variety in it that it is fun to watch. So MerPeople, out streaming now on Netflix.